Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Car on the Hauler post Rockingham. Whether you're listening on Spotify or watching on YouTube, I would appreciate a like, comment, subscribe, follow, share, do whatever you got to do. No Cup Series, obviously, this weekend. I do hope the Cup Series goes to Rockingham next season for whatever race, whether it's an all-star race or a regular season race. I would just really love to see the Rock on the Cup Series schedule next year. They really, I wouldn't say they filled in every seat, but they filled in a good amount of them for the O'Reilly Series race. The Truck Series obviously didn't get as many people in the stands for sure, but nonetheless, a lot of people showed up for Rockingham this weekend, and there was some storylines post the Rock. And before we get into the Truck Series and in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, I do want to, of course, go through our weekend winners, top 10 results, and the points update for the O'Reilly Series and the Craftsman Truck Series. So first, our weekend winners. It's always Heim time in the Craftsman Truck Series, even if you're not full-time. So Corey Heim wins the Truck Series race in pretty exciting fashion. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And then, of course, William Sawalich gets his first career victory in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series this weekend at The Rock. And let's get straight into our top 10 results, starting with the Craftsman Truck Series. Of course, you had Heim Time get the victory. We had Caden Honeycutt, and I'll talk more about Honeycutt in a minute, just short of getting that first career win once again. In second, we had Lane Riggs getting a third-place finish. Stuart Friesens had a great start to the year in fourth. Grant Infinger able to turn it around with fifth. We had Tyler Ankrum in sixth. Corey LaJoy in his first race replacing Daniel Dye for he's driving full-time the rest of the year. A really good performance, I would say, from LaJoy in seventh. We have Ty Majeski getting an eighth-place finish. Jake Garcia didn't probably get the finish he was hoping for the way, of course, the weekend was going for him. I thought he may have thought he was going to do a little bit better in ninth. And then overall, a really good run from Cole Butcher in 10th. And now the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series top 10. Once again, William Sawalich is your winner. Brandon Jones at the end of that race looked like he may have had a shot at it with another P2 finish. Justin Allgaier continues to just kick all sorts of ass with a third-place finish. Raja Karuth, overall a fairly quiet day, but got up into the top 5 late with a fourth-place finish. Carson Quaffle with the fifth-place finish. At one point in this race, I thought he might have ended up being the guy to beat. That ended up not being the case with the fifth-place finish. Sheldon Creed, P6, continues these good, consistent runs. In seventh, we had Taylor Gray. Eighth, once again, in my opinion, probably the driver of the day, Parker Retzloff, who just continues to overperform every single week. Ryan Sieg had a good day in ninth. And then Corey Day, who at one point looked like he was going to get his first career win, with rounding out the top 10 in 10th. Now that we've gone through the weekend winners and the top 10 results, let's get into our points update, looking at the top 3 in points, and then, of course, our bubble battles. Now, the top 3 in points are pretty interesting here in the Craftsman Truck Series because we have Corey Heim leading the points. Corey Heim has driven 3 out of the 5 races, yet he's in a tie for the points lead with Caden Honeycutt, who's in P2 technically. We have Lane Riggs third in the points, 11 points back, and then we'll just lump him in there. Chandler Smith at 17 points back after his disqualification. We'll talk more about that later. And then we go down to the bubble battle where we have Christian Eckes, 7th in points, 63 points back. We have Ben Rhodes, 8th in points, 68 points back of the points lead. We have Stuart Friesen, who is 87 points back of the points lead. We have our first Dodge Ram driver of Justin Haley, 10th in points, 92 points back. We have Tyler Ankrum, 93 points back at the current moment. And in that position, currently he's the first driver out, but with Corey Heim not being approved to run for the championship, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit, he would technically be on the bubble. But for now, he's the first driver on the outside, 1 point behind Haley, and of course 93 points out of the points lead. And then we have Grant Infinger, 12th in points, or maybe 11th in points. He is 5 points back. It's making it kind of confusing with Heim not being able to run for the championship, but 5 points back Infinger, and then 2 points back of him, 7 points back at the cut line. 13th in points is Jake Garcia. And now we'll look at the standings in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, as the top 3 in points is Justin Allgaier, who has still a huge lead, 120. It's insane. 126 points lead over Jesse Love. Sheldon Creed, third in points, 131 points back of the points lead at the moment. And then we go back to our bubble battle where Parker Retzloff is ninth in points, 193 points back of the points lead. You have Raja Karuth, 207 points back. William Sawalich moves his way into the chase up to 11th in points, 208 points back. Taylor Gray, 219 points back, is currently on the bubble. And then it's a far way back to Sam Mayer, who had a very tough day, 30 points outside of the chase at the moment. And then 14th in points, we have Ryan Sieg, who is 35 points out of the chase. And then, of course, no changes in the Cup Series standings because it was an off week for the NASCAR Cup Series. But let's get into some of my thoughts from the race days that we had at Rockingham on this Easter weekend. Starting with the Craftsman Truck Series, I'm pretty much going to get straight into the end of this race because I think that's the thing that matters the most. I will be talking about Heim's day in a second, but I do want to talk about Caden Honeycutt. Caden Honeycutt has came so close a bunch of times at this point to getting his first career win, almost Sheldon Creed-esque. Of y'all saw how long it took Sheldon Creed to get his first win. Honeycutt is kind of giving me the same feeling, and he didn't have the best car. He didn't have the best truck all race long, and it sounded like Heim was potentially losing a tire at the end of this race, so that could have been a big factor on why this happened. Honeycutt ran top 3, top 5 all race. I'd say he definitely had a top 3 truck, but at the end of this race, he was driving down Corey Heim very, very quickly. Had a couple opportunities to pass him there late, but that would have meant wrecking one of his 2 teammates. Corey Heim obviously won the race, but in my opinion, Honeycutt arguably should have won the race. And my big gripe here is definitely with Tanner Gray. Tanner Gray was battling, I think, Dawson Sutton at the end of that race for a position, but it was clear once Corey Heim and Honeycutt had gotten to him that was no longer going to be possible, whether he battled the leaders or decided to let him by. Either way, it wasn't going to change where he was going to finish. And he decided to battle his 2 teammates who were battling for the win at the end of this race. And I didn't like that at all. I'm not sure why he did that. He probably thought that he had still a chance at Dawson Sutton. But even if that's the case, you're putting your teammates especially Honeycutt, in a really bad position. Honeycutt was pretty much forced to probably wreck one of his team race cars, because if he gets into the back of Tanner Gray on the high side at Rockingham, Tanner Gray is probably going into the wall, or he has to do it to Corey Heim, and at that point, he's potentially wrecking both of them, maybe all 3 of them. I think Honeycutt was put into a really bad position by Tanner Gray. I would call what Tanner Gray did a jackass sort of move, and that's me being as nice as I possibly could, because that was just ridiculous. I get it. You're racing your race, this and that, but there's certain times where you just need to move out of the way, because whether he moved out of the way or did what he did or whatever, he wasn't going to get past Dawson Sutton. He wasn't going to gain any more points for what he was doing. There wasn't that opportunity, and with a couple of laps left, you inserted yourself into the battle for the win with your teammates, where it puts your teammates into especially Honeycutt, puts your teammates into a bad position. Because I think in most scenarios, whether it's Heim or Honeycutt, I think in most scenarios, if a lap car is doing that to the race leaders, especially at the end of that race, you're probably going to get putted into the corner. You're probably going to get knocked out of the way and put in the wall if you're a lap car holding up the leaders. But the fact that it was all 3 of those trucks were Tricon trucks, Honeycutt didn't want to knock him out of the way and put him in the wall. He didn't want anybody getting mad at him at the race team, and especially if he didn't win, because who knows? Maybe he gets into the back of Gray bounces off the wall, and then all 3 Tricon trucks wreck. Lane Riggs was talking about post-race how he was thinking for a second that they were all going to wreck, that something was going to happen. That didn't end up happening because Honeycutt was way too nice. And a very similar thing happened a couple laps earlier. I definitely wouldn't put it on the same playing field per se, but it was similar. Gio Ruggiero, who is also a Tricon truck, I don't know what's going on with Tricon, but they need to learn how to race as lap cars, because Gio Ruggiero kind of got in the way as well. Not nearly as bad as Tanner Gray, who Tanner Gray was pushing it 120% at the end of that race to stay in front of the leaders or battle the leaders, and it affected the end of this race, unfortunately. I just think it was really horrible of Tanner Gray to put Honeycutt into that position where he had to choose, potentially wreck your teammate or teammates to get your first career win. A really mature interview, I'd say, from Honeycutt afterwards, too. I would have went off a lot more than he did. I could definitely tell that he was upset with the way Tanner Gray raced him at the end. And he raced Corey Heim the same. I'm not going to say that he just did it to Honeycutt. He did Heim the same, and he pretty much had to pick and choose. But he should have just moved out of the way. He wasn't going to gain any spots. He wasn't going to lose any spots. He should have just gotten out of the way, because he really affected the end of this race and put Honeycutt in a very difficult position where he had to choose, do I want to get my first win, or but by doing that, I'm going to risk wrecking my teammate and myself and my other teammate. Just a really stupid move from Tanner Gray. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. How did you feel about Tanner Gray in those last couple of laps with Honeycutt? Or let's get to Corey Heim. It's always Heim time in the Craftsman Truck Series. Heim with another victory. He's raced 3 races out of the 5 races this season, and yet he has the points lead. And Chandler Smith ended up getting disqualified post-race, and that's why he ended up getting the points lead. Really unfortunate for Chandler and that race team right there. A huge mistake over there, and he ended up losing a lot of spots and points because of it. Loses the points lead and falls down to 4th in points because of that. But Corey Heim didn't seem like he had a lot of, he said he had good speed, it seemed like, but at the start of this race, all of a sudden he just drove to the front. He just drove right to the front, didn't look back, had the dominant truck all race long, and seemed like he was potentially losing a tire at the end of this race, and still found a way to make it Heim time and got another victory on the season. But I think the big discussion here is that Corey Heim is the points leader, racing 3 out of the 5 races, yet with the way the rules, because they haven't really updated the rules for the chase compared to the playoffs. They didn't change the rule where you have to run all the races. I'd say since it's not win and you're in anymore, and Heim has not run all the races, and yet he still leads the points, he's not eligible to be in the chase. So Corey Heim could potentially be the points leader after, I forget how many races the regular season is, but after the regular season, Corey Heim could potentially be the points leader and not make the chase, which is ridiculous. So if you look at the stat sheet, Corey Heim had a completely dominant day in the Truck Series. If you didn't watch the race, you'd say, oh yeah, Corey Heim just kicked all sorts of ass all day, which is true. But at the end of this race, Honeycutt probably should have won, but his teammate got in the way of that. But Corey Heim, I'd say the big story with him is what I'm talking about here with the points. He's the points leader. Corey Heim is the points leader, and he only raced 3 races, but yet he may not be eligible to compete for the championship because he hasn't competed in all the races, which is just complete blasphemy. I think they need to update that rule ASAP, because that rule was for the win and you're in system. They hadn't updated that rule for it now being the chase, where it's all about points. So I just find it completely silly and completely stupid that Corey Heim could potentially be the leader in points when we get to the chase, but not be eligible to compete for the championship. And he's not racing full-time anywhere, obviously. We all want him to race Cup Series full-time because that's what he deserves. And the fact that he might be the points leader at the end of the regular season and not compete for the championship, really stupid. NASCAR needs to get on that and change that rule. I'm not big on changing rules in the middle of the season, but this one needs to be changed because it should have been updated before the season even started, and just NASCAR making a huge mistake, in my opinion, on that. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. How do you feel about that? Corey Heim could potentially be the points leader at the end of the regular season and not compete for the championship. All right. Let's move on to the O'Reilly Series part of this discussion. And before I really talk about the things that happened in this race, I want to talk about my personal thing here, and is that I don't know how many people ended up dealing with this, but I lost my coverage, and they still haven't brought it back up on CW, and this is like an hour after the race, so it's been out for like 3 hours almost at this point, that we couldn't watch the race on the CW. It went out on DirecTV. It seemed like it went out on Cox as well to customers out here in Arizona. I don't know how many people around the country this ended up affecting, but I couldn't watch the end of this race on TV. CW doesn't have the race available on their app. You could watch a battle cam and driver cams, and I could have went on YouTube, which I did as well, to watch Cleetus's cam. So I think CW needs to fix some things. I talked about it last year, how CW needs to have their races on the app. They put everything on the app except for the actual race itself, which in my opinion doesn't make any sense, especially with nowadays we're in the age of streaming. So I think that's a huge error on CW's part. And I don't know if it's CW or DirecTV or what, because Cox was dealing with the same thing. So maybe it wasn't DirecTV. Maybe it was just all CW in Arizona for some reason. But Channel 7 on for the CW was not working. So you need to get on that. Yeah, it's still not up. My dad's pointing at it. It's been like 3 hours. How long has it been now since it went out? Like 3 hours? 4 hours maybe?
20 laps into the race?
It wasn't 20 laps. It was at the end of stage 2. It was end of stage 2. It was like halfway through the race almost when it went out. But because I even made a tweet about it, and I DirecTV helped respond to me, but they still haven't figured it out. So I don't know if anybody else dealt with that, but let me know about that in the comments. But let's actually talk about the race. It looked like there was 2 drivers that could have potentially gotten their first career wins here today, and that was Corey Day and Brent Cruz. Corey Day started on the pole. We've talked about in the last couple of weeks how he's improved so much with his racing IQ and just him staying out of trouble on the racetrack. Started on the pole, dominated the early portions of this race, and got stuck in traffic, and at that point just couldn't come back to the front. It seemed like track position and clean air was king, which it usually is, but it meant more today than what it usually would, at least for the O'Reilly series. Today was more of like a Cup Series day when it comes to the clean air. So Corey Day wasn't able to win, get a top 10 finish. But the one I really feel for is Brent Cruz, because at one point Brent Cruz completely took over this race. Looked like he had his opportunity to get his first career win. His 18th birthday was earlier on in the week, so he'll be racing the rest of the season and that number 19 for Joe Gibbs Racing and competing for the championship in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. And I think his crew chief just completely screwed him over. You have the race lead. It seems like you have the dominant race car, but you decide to take 2 tires from the race lead with, I think it was like, 50 to go or something like that near the end of this race, and it cost him really badly. Brent Cruz ended up losing a tire on the next run, ended up finishing a couple laps down. Just really disappointing for Brent Cruz, who might have won his first race here today, but I felt like it was a really, really bad call from his crew chief to take 2 tires. And on the flip side of it, his teammate William Sawalich also took two tires, and he ended up going to victory lane. So maybe it was the right call. I don't know. But it seemed like it was a bad call, and that from the fact that you have the dominant race car, you're leading the field, and you take 2 tires, I don't think it was overall a great decision. But maybe if he didn't lose the tire, it could have turned out a little bit differently. But even before he started losing the tire, Sawalich was able to pull away from him on those 2 tires. So just disappointing day, I'd say, for Cruz and Day. Day got a top 10 still, so I guess it wasn't all that bad. But both those drivers could have gotten their first career wins here today and just weren't able to get it. And I know they're both coming up here very soon. Let me know your thoughts on Corey Day and Brent Cruz's performance at The Rock. And let's talk about the driver that actually got his first career win, William Sawalich, who had a very tough year last year, struggled mightily in that number 18 machine last year. I've made the argument that maybe he doesn't deserve that ride anymore. I've went on the record saying that before, that maybe he doesn't deserve that ride. He did really well in ARCA, but once he got to there was Xfinity Series last year. Once he got to the Xfinity Series last year, he just seemed to struggle quite a bit. And once he began to struggle, he almost struggled even more because he seemed like he needed the confidence or whatnot, and just really struggled last year. And he started off this year okay. I wouldn't say it was bad. He started off this year okay. And to get that first win has to really be a shot in the arm for William Sawalich and that number 18 Joe Gibbs team, that they can maybe turn it around and compete for a title with this 19-year-old kid, William Sawalich, who I also heard today was actually the first driver in NASCAR history to win in the top 3 national series from the state of Minnesota. A very weird stat, but I saw that after the race. First Minnesota-born driver to win in the NASCAR National Series, so that's pretty interesting. I'm surprised no one from Minnesota has ever won before that, with all the years NASCAR has been around. But William Sawalich, maybe he can turn around his career, because I think a lot of people, including myself, have doubted him over the last year and a half, and he hasn't really performed well in his Truck Series starts as well. He's honestly been kind of a bust, in my opinion, but maybe this is where he turns it around and he's able to figure it out and become an O'Reilly Series driver and eventually compete for a Cup Series ride within the next couple years. The future's looking bright. Obviously, you have Zilich in the Cup Series. You have Corey Day and Brent Cruz, who are very close to getting their first career win. And now you got William Sawalich finally getting his first career win in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series in the number 18 for Joe Gibbs Racing. So congratulations to Sawalich on that, and we'll see if he can continue it throughout the rest of the season. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. How did you feel about William Sawalich's performance at the Rock, getting his first career victory at the age of 19? All right, before we finish this up, I have to talk about Cleetus. Got to talk about Cleetus McFarland. He's probably going to be the person and the thing that everybody is talking about after this race, not just because he is Cleetus McFarland. He has more followers, more subscribers, more everything than anybody else in NASCAR by far. Very popular guy, very popular driver, I would say as well. First, before I really get into the O'Reilly race, I do want to give him his flowers on the ARCA East race. Got a top 5, got a 4th place finish. Did a burnout on the front straightaway. Got a front straightaway interview for a 4th place. He was on the front straight getting an interview for 4th place. I have never seen that, but congratulations to Cleetus. That was a pretty good moment for Cleet, able to get a good finish. And ARCA is definitely getting more used to those cars, and you see it with his performance and with his speed in ARCA that he is figuring those cars out. It's taken him a little bit of time, but he has figured those cars out at least a little bit. His cameraman, George Siciliano, or some of you may know him as Squirrel McNutt, got a top 10 as well. That 9th place finish for him. So good on both of them to get the finishes that they probably wanted. A good day in ARCA for them. But let's move on to the O'Reilly race for Cleet. And from the very beginning of this race, it was a struggle bus, I would say, for Cleetus. He almost wrecked himself on the inside on lap number 2, trying to make a 3 wide. He quickly learned that, hey, I probably shouldn't do that. That's a stupid move. He came over the radio and said, if you see me do anything stupid like that again, you check me. Pretty much is what, that's not exactly the exact quote, but he said something along those lines, and he just really struggled the rest of the day. He almost spun himself 2 or 3 more times than he actually did spin himself at one point. And then after almost spinning himself that last time with around 20 or 30 to go, I was watching his in-car, and it just seemed like at that point he just slowed it down like a whole 5 to 10 miles per hour, just made sure he stayed above minimum speed, and he ended up getting lapped 2 or 3 times in those last 20 laps. And I think at that point he was like, I don't want to wreck this race car. I don't want to total this race car. I don't want to wreck anybody out of this race. And he was drinking out of a water hose all day long. He was just drinking out of more of like a fire hose, not even a water hose, more like drinking out of a fire hose, out of a power washer, I would say he was drinking out of. It was a tough watch. Whether you're a Cleetus McFarland fan or a Cleetus McFarland hater or whatever you are, it was a very tough watch because we know how good those RCR cars are, and it was difficult to watch. It was difficult to watch. But I don't know what his expectations or what anybody's expectations were for Cleet going into this race. Your first career start in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, the second highest division in all of NASCAR, at probably the toughest racetrack on the schedule in Rockingham Speedway, the Rock. I think he really did about as good as he really was going to do. Like, I'm not trying to make excuses for the guy, but I think he did really as good as he really could have done. He's not experienced as a race car driver. He has very limited experience in professional race car driving. Obviously, he's raced at his racetrack, the Freedom Factory. He's raced Crown Vics. He's done that sort of stuff. That's cool. He's raced some ARCA races. That's cool. And he did, like I said earlier, he did well in the ARCA East race earlier on in the day, but he has no experience. He has absolutely no experience and got pretty much fed to the wolves there today and finished. I think he ended up finishing 7 laps down, and that's on pure speed. That's not on him. He never totaled the race. He had no damage on the race car when he was done with this thing. I think he had a little bit of damage on the right side, like some scrapes, but that's normal post-race. Other than that, he had a clean race car at the end of this thing. Just really struggled mightily. I don't know what I expect him to do more races. I expect him to continue to race in the ARCA series. I expect him to continue to do that. I know he was scheduled to race Talladega in the O'Reilly series. I think he probably would have less issues there, but I know the main reason he was doing this race is that way NASCAR would approve him for Talladega, and I personally don't know how you approve Cleetus for Talladega if he almost self-spun 4 times and actually did self-spin another time. So that was a very difficult watch to see Cleetus struggle as much as he did. I did like his post-race interview. He was very frank about it. He seemed like he knew that this may happen, that he was going to get fed to the wolves and this and that. So a good interview, I would say, from Cleetus after the race. Didn't seem as distraught as he was at the end of the Truck Series race at Daytona, where you could hear in his voice that he was very just disappointed in himself because he wrecked himself. So the fact that he was, and I think that's why I said it before, I think that's why in the last 20 laps, you saw him just go even slower than he already was, because he was making sure he didn't wreck the car, he didn't wreck other drivers, and he just finished the race clean, and everybody finished that race clean. So I think that was smart on his part to do that. I also have to commend Ty Dillon, because Ty Dillon, who's really beginning, we've heard it before that Ty Dillon, once he ends up retiring, and same thing with Austin Dillon, once they end up retiring from NASCAR, they're going to be the heads of Richard Childress Racing. And he really showed that he's a future owner today, because he constantly came over the radio when he saw Cleetus struggling, just giving him advice and telling him what he needed to do, trying to give him confidence. He even came over the radio after the race, pretty much saying you did the best you could do. You didn't wreck the race car, so today was a success. Even though he probably was thinking in his mind that it wasn't a success, he's trying to keep that confidence up in Cleetus. They definitely want Cleetus to race more races for them, because they did sign him to a 2 or 3 year deal for a couple of races every year. So they have the belief in Cleetus that they can turn him in to a race car driver. So I really have to commend Ty Dillon on doing all of that. But Cleetus, really struggle of a day. I'm excited to see him back on the track in his next opportunity. I'm trying to at least give him a little bit of credit, because anybody, like for example, if they threw me out on the racetrack, and I have almost as much racing experience as Cleetus, that really says a lot. Cleetus doesn't have any experience. I almost have as much as Cleetus, and I've never raced. So, and anybody in our position as fans, if we're asked to race for Richard Childress Racing at Rockingham, every single one of us are going to say, yeah, I'm down to race that. I don't think anybody is going to say no to that, whether you have a bunch of experience or no experience. So I have to at least give him a little credit on that. So we'll have to see what the future is for Cleetus McFarland in NASCAR. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. How did you feel about Cleetus McFarland's performance today at the Rock? And for all that, that will do it for this week's edition of Car on the Hauler. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, I would appreciate a comment, like, subscribe, follow, share, do whatever you got to do. And for now, I'm Trackside Larry saying peace.